amazing love that welcomes me, the kindness of mercy that bought with blood wholeheartedly my soul undeserving. God, you're so good. God, you're so good. God, you're so good. You're so good to me. Behold the cross, age to age, and hour by hour. The dead are raised, the sinner saved, the work of your power. God, you're so good. God, you're so good. God, you're so good. You're so good to me. And should this life bring suffering, Lord, I will remember what Calvary has bought for me, both now and forever. God, you're so good. God, you're so good. God, you're so good. You're so good to me. God, you're so good. God, you're so good. God, you're so good. You're so good to me.
If you know my story at all, you know that I used to come here to PBC for a lot of years, back when I worked at Bethany Camp. And then God moved us to different parts of the country before eventually bringing us back here. And while I was away and living down south, every now and then I would get on YouTube and look up PBC services online. You know, just check in what's happening. I loved the church here and loved the people. How many people could I still recognize? How many people did I know? What was happening? Things like that. And pretty early on, after we had left, I noticed there was this guy that would sing a special number every now and then, on his guitar or on the piano, or was helping with the music, and I didn't know who it was. They had started attending after we had left. But I just thought, oh, how cool is that? That God had brought somebody to this church that had that kind of musical ability, and I really enjoyed listening to him sing, never thinking for a moment that God would eventually bring us back here and then be able to partner with him in ministry. I'm referring, of course, to James Lorette. James is the one that you just saw on the video with the guitar. He's the main one that leads our music here. I enjoy listening to James sing. I enjoy listening to James sing, especially the song that you just heard, God, You're So Good. I associate this song with James just because I've heard him do it a number of times. I've seen our church moved by this song when we sing it. So I knew that I wanted it to be a part of this series, and I want to just slow down and unpack this song. It seems like a relatively simple song, but there is so much packed into this that as I was writing the sermon, thinking through the song, man, it just kept expanding and growing because there is a lot here in these words that we just sang together. And what I want to do is I'm just going to start with verse 1. And literally, I just want to take it phrase by phrase and unpack a little bit of what that means. What is it that we're singing in this slow, simple, contemplative song that we've called God, You're So Good? So, verse 1, we start with these two words, amazing love. What is it about God's love that is amazing? That's really easy to gloss over, right, at the very beginning of the song, right? We've hardly gotten into the worship mode, if you will. But if you looked up the definition for amazing, when we sing that, amazing love, it causes great surprise or wonder. Some synonyms would be it's astonishing, surprising, extraordinary, incredible, unbelievable, wonderful love. Now we use the word amazing, I think, probably too much, right? We overuse it for things. You might, if you were with us last week here at the in-person, we had our Soup and Sunday event, and you might have come away saying, wow, that was an amazing turnout. Then we watched the Super Bowl that night. Wow, that was an amazing play or an amazing result to the game. Or you might use it in a negative sense. Oh, that was amazingly bad. Or someone showed an amazingly lack of concern. We use the word amazing all the time. I even got my phone out and I searched through my texts, hit the little magnifying glass there and typed in the word amazing just to see where it appeared in my text. And I saw it appear when we were texting, or I was texting with people about healing that they had seen God done, or the church family that had cared for them, or even just the way God had lined up certain songs to go with a particular sermon, and it was an amazing song selection, or God's amazing providence and just scheduling somebody to be where they needed to be before they knew that they needed to be there. We use amazing all the time. What is so amazing about God's love? Romans chapter 5, verses 6 through 8 give us a glimpse to the answer of this. For while we were still helpless, at the right time, Christ died for the ungodly. For rarely will someone die for a just person, though for a good person perhaps someone might even dare to die. But God proves His own amazing love for us, in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. That word helpless, or while we were still helpless, that reminds me of a newborn baby. A newborn baby is the very definition of helpless, aren't they? But most parents know in the moment that their child is born and they hold that helpless infant in their arms, there isn't anything that they wouldn't do for them. That is love. The baby's not offering anything in return other than cries and lack of sleep. But you love the baby. I like the way the Message paraphrase puts those same verses that we just read. Here's how it reads. Christ arrives right on time to make this happen. He didn't and doesn't wait for us to get ready. He presented Himself for the sacrificial death when we were far too weak and rebellious to do anything to get ourselves ready. And even if we hadn't been so weak, we wouldn't have known what to do anyway. Now we can understand someone dying for a person worth dying for. And we can understand how someone good and noble could inspire us to selfless sacrifice. But God put His love on the line for us by offering His Son in sacrificial death while we were of no use whatever to Him. Every parent at some point can grow tired of the sacrifice, the effort, the work that it takes for this helpless baby. You hear that baby crying in the night and you think, oh, not again. Okay, tag, it's your turn, you might say to your spouse. But it is never that way with Jesus. In his amazing love, he never grows tired of you. In fact, here's what we sing next. Amazing love that welcomes me. When I think of that phrase, that welcomes me, I think of the story of the prodigal son. You might be familiar with this story. You find it in the Bible. In this story, a man has two sons. The younger son says, "Give me my inheritance now. I don't want to wait. Give me what's due to me." And he gets it, and he goes out and he travels around and he squanders everything that he has been given. He lives in foolish ways, and he literally works himself down to nothing. He's helpless. He ends up living with pigs, eating the same food that pigs eat. Nobody is helping him out, and he's finally at the end of his rope. So he decides to go back to his father, this younger son, and he decides, I'm going to go back and I'm going to ask for forgiveness. And I'm not going to be asked to be made his son again. I'll just ask for a job. Just make me like one of your hired workers, he says. And so he does. He journeys back to his father. And this is where we pick up the story in Luke chapter 15, verse 20. So he got up and he went to his father. Listen to this. While the son was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran, he threw his arms around his neck, and he kissed him. The son said to him, "Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son." But the father told his servants, "Quick, bring out the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Then bring the fattened calf and slaughter it, and let's celebrate with a feast, because this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." So they began to celebrate. A few verses later, he says again, "We had to celebrate and rejoice because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." There's a lot of applications from this story. And actually, the main point of this story that Jesus was telling has to do with the fact that the father really has two lost sons. It's more of a commentary on the older son than it is the younger son. But that's another sermon for another day. The one application that we can look here is that Jesus doesn't love you because he has to, or because he's obligated to, or he doesn't do so begrudgingly. When you put your faith and trust in Jesus Christ as a helpless sinner offering nothing, Jesus welcomes you. He rolls out the red carpet and says, "Welcome. We have been looking for you. We have been waiting for you. It is time to celebrate. You are now my son. You are now my daughter. Everything I have is yours." Amazing love that welcomes me. We've all been in situations where we didn't feel welcome. Somebody said something. You knew you really weren't wanted there. It was kind of awkward. But we've been in situations too where your presence was desired. That's how Jesus is with you. Amazing love, even though we're helpless, even though we're sinners, that welcomes me. And then we sing the kindness of mercy. We already mentioned this with love a moment ago, that Jesus didn't have to do what he did. And we mentioned that here again with this line, the kindness of mercy. We talked about God's mercy in a song a few weeks ago, but let me just cover some things again. Mercy is this compassion or forgiveness shown towards someone whom it is within one's power to punish or harm. And so when we sing this line, the kindness of mercy, let's not overcomplicate it. There's just something kind in what God did. There's a kindness there in this mercy, this compassion or forgiveness shown towards me. In Ephesians chapter 2, verses 4 and 5, "But God, who is rich in mercy, because of his great love," that's tying those two ideas together, amazing love and the kindness of mercy, "because of his great love that he had for us, made us alive with Christ, even though we were dead in trespasses," or even though we were helpless, even though we were still sinners, you are saved by grace. Amazing love, the kindness of mercy, that bought with blood wholeheartedly. Colossians chapter 1, verses 19 and 20. For God was pleased to have all his fullness dwell in him, and through him to reconcile, that is, to bring together, to restore everything to himself, whether things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through his blood shed on the cross. You know, when we talk about mercy and love, in order to have peace with God, because of our sin. Because remember, God is a holy God. He is a righteous God. He is a just God. He can't overlook sin. He loves us, but we have a sin problem. He can't just sweep that under the rug. Then he wouldn't be a holy, righteous, just God. God bought us. He paid for us, paid for our sin with the blood of Jesus. Jesus, who was fully God and fully man, holy, without blemish, perfect, priceless, the blood of that Lamb paid for you and paid for me. But that word, wholeheartedly, here's what I want you to remember with that. There was no buyer's remorse for God. You ever have buyer's remorse? You ever go and you pay for something and it ends up being more than you thought it was going to be, or it didn't quite turn out the way that you thought it was going to be, and you're like, I wish I hadn't done that. I mentioned at the in-person last week, Carrie and I had gone up to Niagara Falls on Friday and Saturday, just a one-night getaway there. And we had decided on Friday night we were going to go to the Outback Steakhouse right there by the falls. I always enjoy a good steak. And we knew we had been to that area before, and of course it's right in the tourist area, and it's on a Friday night, that it was not going to be cheap. But I said to Carrie, I said, let's go and let's just do it, and we're going to pay whatever it costs, right? We're not going to worry about the menu. In fact, I said, here, you pay the bill. I'm not even going to look, because I knew what I would do is I'd go and I'd look at the menu and decide it was too much and just we weren't going to do it, and we'd end up going to get Subway or something like that. Not that there's anything wrong with Subway, okay? But I like a good Subway. But anyway, I'm digressing here. So let's just go and let's just pay for it, and that it's going to be what it's going to be. And Carrie said, okay, she was going to keep me to my word. So we go to Outback and we sit down. And Carrie, I think, had gone off to go to the restroom, and they bring the menus, and I'm looking at the menus with the thought in my head that we were going to pay whatever it cost. Until I looked at the prices. And I don't know if you've ever eaten there or you've been up in that area, but you know, things are just more expensive. But for a 12-ounce steak, 12-ounce ribeye, I think it was, they wanted $60. $60! For a 12-ounce ribeye. Now I know things have just gotten expensive, and yeah, it's Canadian dollars, and the American dollar is a little bit stronger, so it was going to convert to be a little bit less than that. But still, I was like, that is way too much. No. Carrie comes back from the bathroom. She can immediately see my face, and I'm like, I don't want to be stuck with buyer's remorse here. We're not paying $60 for one 12-ounce steak. And she said, you said we were going to do it. We were going to do it. And I said, I know what I said. What do they got on the appetizer section? Psalm 149:4 says, for the Lord takes pleasure in his people. He adorns the humble with salvation. God does not have buyer's remorse with you. We read this verse a couple weeks ago, Jude 24. Now to him who is able to protect you from stumbling and to make you stand in the presence of his glory without blemish and with great joy. Well, you might look at your life, beloved, and think that you snuck in, that God didn't know what he was getting with you, that the advertising label on your life didn't reveal everything that there was to know, and if only God had known how mistakes that you were going to make, or that maybe you weren't going to feel worthy, that somehow he would take it back. But God knew exactly what he was doing with you. He bought you with blood wholeheartedly. And then we sing at the end of that verse, my soul undeserving. We've already kind of covered the idea of undeserving when we were talking about love. So let me just focus in on my soul. Those two words, my soul. 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 20 says, you were bought with a price. You. Jeremiah 1:5, I chose you before I formed you in the womb. I set you apart before you were born. Luke 12:7, indeed, the hairs of your head are all counted. Don't be afraid. You are worth more than many sparrows. What I want you to take from this idea of my soul is that God bought with blood you. He didn't make a mistake. He knew what he was getting, and he chose you. Your identity, it comes from God. Sometimes we try to find our worth in other things. We try to find our identity in other things. How we look, what people say about us, how many friends we have, how much stuff we have, how much money we have, how many achievements we can obtain. Our identity comes from God saying, you are worth the most valuable thing in the world that there is, the blood of Jesus Christ, and I bought you undeserving. In this first verse, the song is reminding us that we are sinners without hope, restored in our relationship with God because of and through the cross of Jesus Christ. And when that happens, God welcomes you, yes, you, with all your faults, your failures, your weaknesses, your inadequacies. He welcomes you with open arms because you are precious and valuable to him, and he doesn't regret it for 1 second. All of that, the message of this first verse, put together, amazing love that welcomes me, the kindness of mercy, that bought with blood wholeheartedly my soul undeserving, leads us in this contemplative response of a chorus where we echo the psalmist in Psalm 119:68, you are good, and you do what is good. Or in Psalm 116, verses 5 and 7, the Lord is gracious and righteous. Our God is full of compassion. Return to your rest, my soul, for the Lord has been good to you. And so we'll sing, God, you're so good. God, you are so good. God, you're so good. You are so good to me. There's a couple more verses to this song. Let me take a look just for a moment at verse 3. Verse 3 is really actually probably the climax of the song. In verse 3 it goes like this, should this life bring suffering, Lord, I will remember what Calvary has bought for me, both now and forever. Now, in this verse, should really could just be the word when. Right? I mean, should this life bring suffering? This life is going to bring suffering. When this life brings suffering. But what we're doing when we sing this verse 3 is we're really singing Romans 8:18 and 28. For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is going to be revealed to us. We know that all things work together for the good of those who love God, who are called according to his purpose. How do we know this? Because yes, life has suffering, hard things, unspeakable things, tragedies beyond comprehension at times. How do we know? How can we sing with confidence? Well, it's because of the cross of Calvary, where God took the most evil thing that has ever or will ever be done, and he used it for your eternal good and for his glory. That's why Paul says the sufferings of today, what he's going through, what you're going through, won't just pale in comparison. They won't even compare to the glory. It won't even be worth trying to compare to the glory. That's how great the glory is that we will one day see. And I know it is hard to see that and believe it in the moment. To see the goodness of God when you're in your valleys. Where we see psalm after psalm written like this. Have you forgotten about me, God? How long, Lord, will you let this continue? But where does he keep coming back to in those psalms? In the goodness of God. the faithfulness of God. Where does Paul keep coming back to in the midst of his suffering? He sets his mind. He focuses on the goodness of God, the faithfulness of God. Why? Because God proved his goodness. He showed his love to you through the overflowing riches of mercy that he has for you through the cross of Calvary. That is why in the midst of our temporary suffering, though it doesn't always seem very temporary, we know that there will come a day when everything else will fade away. And he will wipe away every tear from our eyes. Death will be no more. Grief, crying, and pain will be no more, Scripture tells us. It's that belief that allows us to sing with our whole hearts because of Calvary. God, you're so good. God, you are so good. God, you are so good. You're so good to me. Let's sing the song together one more time with these thoughts in mind. Would you sing along with us?
Amazing love that welcomes me, the kindness of mercy that bought with blood wholeheartedly my soul undeserving. God, you're so good. God, you're so good. God, you're so good. You're so good to me. Behold the cross, age to age, and hour by hour, the dead are raised, the sinner saved, the work of your power. God, you're so God, you're so good. God, you're so good. You're so good to me. And should this life bring suffering, Lord, I will